is a legend about P.T. Barnum of Barnum and Bailey Circus, who happened upon a man who was importing canned salmon from Russia. But he could not sell the salmon because when the can was opened, the fish was white instead of pink. And people were not accustomed to seeing white salmon. And so P.T. Barnum, taking advantage of the man's misery, bought his entire stock of salmon at a discount rate. And then took the salmon and printed a sticker which he attached to the cans, which read, "Guaranteed not to turn pink in the can." And with that slight switch in frame, he was able to take that which was seen as a negative and flip it in people's minds to a positive. My brothers and sisters, the way we frame things is so important. In the 1960s, the American government, even as it was wrestling with women's rights and with civil rights and trying to understand its footing in the war in Vietnam, the American government believed that it had a moral and democratic responsibility to make sure that Americans did not suffer from poverty. And so the American government declared, United States presidents declared that the United States would fight a war on poverty. Then in the Nixon administration, President Nixon decided that this war on poverty should not be the focus of the nation, but rather what we needed was a war on crime. He said crime is the thing that is crippling the nation. But when talking about crime, he was not talking about murderers or robbers. He was not talking about people who break into one another's cars or homes. He was not talking about people fighting in the streets. He definitely wasn't talking about the Wall Street bankers who bankrupt people and take their pension money. What he was talking about was the civil rights movement and the activists. These were the criminals that he said we needed to fight a war on. And it was another president much beloved in this nation, Ronald Reagan, who took that war on crime and said, what we need now is a war on drugs. And so, my brothers and sisters, what began as a war on poverty, a war to make sure that everybody had food to eat and nobody was forced to live beneath a certain standard of living here in America, became a war against protests, so-called war on crime, and a war on black people, so-called war on drugs. Framing, my brothers and sisters, is so important. It is framing that takes the words of the gospel of Jesus Christ, words that are meant for liberation, words that are meant to set the captives free. It is framing, my brothers and sisters, that takes these same words and uses this same Bible against the people. The same Bible that our ancestors read and found words of freedom and liberation, that people read these same words today and use it to create oppression and to create restrictions on people. It's the same Bible, my brothers and sisters, and oftentimes I have racked my brain and wondered how it is that people have read the same text and read such different things, and framing has so much to do with it. In the scripture we read to open this morning, the Lord's Prayer, that prayer that Jesus taught the disciples to pray is a vastly different prayer just depending on one word that is used, that is changed, that is substituted depending on the tradition that you grew up in. As the prayer is written here in Luke and in Matthew, in the Greek, where it was first written, Jesus teaches the disciples to pray, "Forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors." Forgive us our debts, as we forgive those who are indebted to us. But somewhere, my brothers and sisters, as the Bible was being translated out of the Greek and then out of the Latin, into which it was first translated, into languages that people could read, when the Bible was no longer the privileged possession of people who were able to read languages that nobody spoke, but it was printed in languages that people read every day, first into German, then into French, eventually into Old English. When the Bible was translated, my brothers and sisters, that one of the translators said that we need to change this word from "forgive us our debts" to "forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us." It seems like a small change, just one word, "forgive us our debts" or "forgive us our trespasses. When I was a child in Southern Baptist Church, in the children's church, we learned to sing the Lord's Prayer, "Forgive us our debts." When we got to the big church, the church with the adults, they sang, "Forgive us our trespasses." We barely paid attention to the shift in words, my brothers and sisters. But when you slow down and examine the change, it's a big difference. Because "forgive us our debts" implies that there is a financial transaction that has taken place. That there has been money that has been exchanged. And that somebody is indebted to someone else. And so this is a forgiveness for a financial transaction. I am unable to repay that which I owe, so forgive my debts. It is the plea of somebody who has taken a loan out on a house. Perhaps in this market, a house that was overvalued when it was sold, and once the market corrected itself, the house became underwater and unable to keep up with payments. They say, "Forgive me, Wells Fargo, my debt." This is a financial transaction, my brothers and sisters. But trespasses is a completely different frame. Trespasses is not in the realm of the economy. This is not a conversation that would happen between a banker and an individual. This is not the type of word that you would use on Wall Street, my brothers and sisters. But trespasses is a word that you would use in the criminal justice system. Forgive us our trespasses. Forgive us our offenses. Forgive us our crimes. As we forgive those who have enacted criminal offenses against us. It is a change in the language of the conversation, my brothers and sisters, because embedded in this slight change in the frame, this one word difference alters an entire belief on what is moral conversation. Because now, moral conversation is about criminal actions and activities. But we do not talk about financial transactions as moral conversations. When we talk about the economy, my brothers and sisters, we do not talk about it in a moral frame. We talk about it as if it's somehow distant or something other than what happens in religious conversation or in the realm of faith. I I remember, my brothers and sisters, when this so-called Christian establishment tried to declare a moral Sunday, and they wanted people to preach about political morality issues, my brothers and sisters. And I looked at the list of issues they wanted us to talk about, and nowhere on the list, Reverend Larkin, was the economy. We were living in the middle of the Bush presidency where George W. Bush took an economy that was growing with a middle class that was growing and bankrupted the economy. It was the worst economy we had seen since the Great Depression in the 1920s. And nowhere on the list did we talk about the economy. Yeah. The only people who were making money were people who were arms dealers, people who were building weapons, selling them as we were going to war, a war that was not paid for on the books, but was paid for off the books, so that we plummeted into a depression and nobody could see what was happening because they were hiding and shuffling papers. Nobody talked about these hidden transactions as moral actions. Because we had replaced forgive us our debts with forgive us our trespasses. And so when Pookie and Ray Ray are stopped by the police, and Pookie has a couple of grams of marijuana on his person, and Ray Ray has a gun under his seat, whether or not Ray Ray has a license for the gun, because Pookie and Ray Ray are in the same vehicle, and because there is marijuana and gun in the same vehicle, regardless of the fact that neither one was in conversation with the other about what they had on them, and regardless of what their intent was, Pookie and Ray Ray are both now charged with criminal possession. A felony, which means they are both going to jail. And they will both have this felony on their record for the rest of their lives. And even this great bill that I'm glad is going to be on the ballot this year, this a great attempt to try to inch away at the mass incarceration system, to take possession charges and decriminalize them so they become misdemeanors instead of felonies. And in theory, people who are in prison for possession are going to be released from it. That does not count criminal possession, which means Pookie and Ray Ray are still going to be in jail. This law does not help Pookie and Ray Ray in this situation, my brothers and sisters. That is seen as criminal, and Pookie and Ray Ray are seen as immoral. But when Jamie Dimon, on behalf of the greedy board members of one of the nation's largest banks, decides that he is going to gobble up other banks and build an even bigger system, and does so at the expense of the American economy, because they aren't careful in thinking about if they can sustain all the debt that they incur by buying out other banks, and then they get to the point where they can't pay their debts, and they come to the U.S. government and say, we need help to bail us out. The U.S. government does not imply moral language against Jamie Dimon, but instead they give our money, taxpayer money, money that we have paid that ought to be going to feed the poor. They give that to Jamie Dimon to sustain the bank, because they say the bank is too big to fail. And then rather than imposing restrictions to say that because you've been irresponsible with money in the past, we're going to limit your ability to use money in the future, they bring Jamie Dimon before Congress and they say, tell us how we can help you be better. Meanwhile, nobody's asking Pookie or Ray Ray that same question. Because our moral conversation, my brothers and sisters, has been stolen away from us because of the framing of our biblical text. The reason I bring this up in this parable, my brothers and sisters, is because I have believed for the entire time that I've read this parable up until about 2.5 days ago, that I was reading a parable about trespasses. That when Jesus says at the end of this, so my heavenly Father will also do to you, every one of you, if you do not forgive your brother or sister from your heart. I believed Jesus was talking about trespasses. That Jesus was saying that I needed to forgive my brother or sister if they offend me, if they do something against me, if they commit an action against me, whether that action is seen as a criminal or just a personal slight against me, that I ought to forgive them, my brothers and sisters. But when I took time to slow down and read the parable in its entirety, nowhere in the parable does Jesus talk about trespasses. Amen. Amen. In this entire parable, Jesus talks about debts. The parable is about a man who owed a large debt to his Lord, to his master, and he is called in to account for that debt. Can I tell you that in my reading of this, I have passed judgment on this man? How could this man be so irresponsible to misuse this large sum of money? Certainly he had to have had the trust of his master or his Lord to be able to borrow such a large sum of money. That a talent was considered to be worth more than 15 years of a wage for a regular laborer. That some translations say that this is about $100,000 worth of debt. Other translations have put this in the millions of dollars worth of debt. My brothers and sisters, what it comes down to is that this is more debt than any one person ought to have, and definitely more debt than any one person could repay. How irresponsible, I thought, of this man to borrow such a large sum of money and then be able to repay it, placing himself and his family in jeopardy. This man is irresponsible. He ought to be punished in some kind of way because of his irresponsibility. That is what I thought when I read this text, my brothers and sisters. It took me a minute. It took me several readings of this text to realize that the assumptions I was placing on this text were not in alignment with what's happening in the history of this text. Let me explain it to you this way. This man did not borrow the money from his master. All right. All right. I know the text says he owed it. Yeah. But notice nowhere did he say that he borrowed it. Amen. This man's job was most likely a form of a tax collector. In other words, the Lord was able to get rich because he was collecting money either on behalf of the Roman government or because he was able to loan money out himself and charge interest on the money that he loaned out for others. He was a combination between a tax collector and a loan shark. All right. All right. All right. You may consider him a bail bondsman. This is how this Lord is making his money. The slave's job in this text, then, is to collect the payments that are owed to the Lord. Because no tax collector, no loan shark would go out and collect their own debts. They would send somebody out to do it. You remember what happened in the parable we looked at over the last 2 weeks. when somebody went out to collect a debt that they thought they owed to the master, that sometimes violence happened. So you would not go out to collect your own debt. You would pay somebody to go out and collect the debt for you. And so this man's job was to go out and collect debts that were owed by other people to his Lord or his master. Now, because of the time, my brothers and sisters, the custom was when you signed up to collect a debt, you were personally responsible for the debt that needed to be collected. Which means that whatever it was that you were assigned to collect became your personal responsibility. Whatever you were able to collect on top of that was yours to keep. So the Lord had no care about what you actually collected, as long as you turned back over the amount that you were assigned to collect. So if I were supposed to collect for the Lord of this house $10,000, and I said, everybody in here now owes me $1,000, and that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, because we charging children in here. That's $23,000 that I'm collecting. I turned 10,000 of it over. Amen. But the other 13,000 then becomes mine to keep. That's how the system worked, my brothers and sisters. Now, in that economy, everybody wasn't able to pay equally. So what they would do is they would look and see, yeah, Brother Smith, I see you look a little blessed today. So we're going to raise your debt to $1,500. And Sister Jones, I understand you're struggling a little bit, so we're going to reduce yours to $800. And so they would adjust people's debt up or down depending on what they knew about the financial capabilities of that person to pay. So when this slave is called to bring account to his master to settle a debt, he is not settling his own debt, but he's settling a debt that he was responsible for collecting for others. So when this slave then is begging for mercy, give me time to pay the debt, he's just saying, give me the time I need to collect this debt that other people owe you from them, so that I can pay you the portion of the debt I'm responsible for paying. Now, my brothers and sisters, the man had to have been good at his job to be able to be charged with collecting so much debt. Which means this wasn't his first time collecting debt. He had done this before and had done a good job for his master. But the one time he fell short when it came time to pay, his master is now ready to sell him and his entire family into slavery. This is an economic issue, my brothers and sisters. This is not about trespasses. This is about debts. It's about the economy. It is the moral equivalent of what happened in 2009 and 2010 when people lost their homes because financial markets were irresponsible in how they gave out loans. When people lost their homes because people gave subprime loans to African Americans because they thought we were not credit worthy. And so they gave us loans with higher interest rates, charging us extra just to have a piece of the American dream, my brothers and sisters, because they thought we weren't deserving of it in the first place. And nobody went to the banks and held the banks accountable for their corrupt or racist practices. What they did was the banks then took the houses that people had been paying on the entire time. People who had never missed a payment lost their homes, my brothers and sisters, and nobody, no preacher, not one mega church pastor, not one Joel Osteen or bishop had anything to say about the large banks that were taking people's homes, even the people in their congregation, because they're too busy preaching about trespasses. brothers and sisters, this is why I was excited. You can ask Brother Lenny or Sister Karen. This is why I was excited on Tuesday when the president of the Ohio Baptist State Convention said no longer will the convention be supporting or selling or using any white evangelical theologians in their course materials, my brothers and sisters, because that white evangelical theology has corrupted our minds and has us blaming ourselves and blaming one another for actions that are enacted upon us by a corrupt system that is designed to pick our pockets, to make us broke, and then blame us for our poverty. That's why I can't do it anymore. That's why I can't turn on, I can't listen to these white preachers, no matter how sincere they are. And some of these preachers that look black too, I can't listen to them anymore because, my brothers and sisters, that it's poisonous to our spirits. We don't have the moral capacity or courage to speak truth to power in this time, my brothers and sisters, because the theological richness of the Bible has been taken away from us because of a simple reframing. Because debts become trespasses. My brothers and sisters. So I can't even get into the meat of the text like I want to because you got to come back next week for that. Because this week, what I want you to understand, my brothers and sisters, is that you can't even read this parable correctly. You can't even understand what's happening in the parable. You can't even begin to ask Jesus, what do you want me to do, until you shift your focus. This is why Paul says in Romans chapter 12, be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Do not be conformed to this capitalist system, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Do not be conformed to this white supremacist system, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, my brothers and sisters. That's why every once in a while we ought to get up and make our way to the church house so we can get that capitalist white supremacist infection out of us, my brothers and sisters, so that you can get a shot of somebody's black theology that reminds you who you are and whose you are, so you can reject that white theology, reject the white supremacy, my brothers and sisters, so that even when it comes out of the mouth of the President of the United States, there is something inside of you that can stand up and say, that's not of God, because I've had my framing adjusted. I can see this thing a little more clearly now. I was misled before. I was reading this wrong before, but I read this clearly now. I can see, my brothers and sisters, that Jesus is leveraging a critique against financial institutions, which means somebody ought to be talking to the big banks. Somebody ought to be talking to the big businesses. Somebody ought to go downtown and talk to the business association that's trying to force homeless people off of 3rd Street and tell them that their actions are not right in the eyes of God. That they're trying to charge the homeless people with trespassing. But this is not an issue of trespassing, my brothers and sisters. This is an issue of a financial system, even in Cincinnati, that gives GE millions of dollars in tax cuts to occupy the space on the other side of 3rd Street, but won't even let people take their own tents on 3rd Street. This is not an issue of trespasses. This is an issue of debts, my brothers and sisters, of a business community that thinks that it's appropriate to try to raise the rent on teachers and janitors who are coming to work, to school, to raise the rent on the parking spaces they use. Because the $6 million they collected in revenue last year, above their expenses, the $6 million in profit they raised last year was not enough. And so they're trying to nickel and dime the teachers and janitors out of more money. Somebody's got to tell them this is immoral and this is not right. Somebody's got to say to the people who sit on the Child Poverty Collaborative, framed that way because we don't want to talk about adult poverty. Because somehow we think that children live in poverty outside of their parents or their families. My brothers and sisters, that somebody needs to tell them that all of the money that they have in that Child Poverty Collaborative that they refuse to use to pay people wages. And saying we can talk about anything as it relates to poverty except for raising people's wages. Somebody needs to tell them that their framing is immoral. And if they won't use the gifts that God has given them on behalf of the people, then God in heaven stands in judgment against them. And maybe, just maybe, if we can get just a couple more of these preachers to stop running around taking photo ops with these politicians and start speaking a prophetic word to these politicians. Just maybe we can get people to start believing in church once again. Start believing that God loves them once again. If we can do our job and speak what thus saith the Lord instead of what thus wanted the mayor to hear, maybe then, my brothers and sisters, people will still believe there is a God who sits high and who looks low. But I just want to say, my brothers and sisters, in case you don't hear it anywhere else this week, in case you don't hear it on the televangelist or from the radio preachers, in case you don't hear it from any of those handkerchief waving, perm having preachers, my brothers and sisters, in case you don't hear it from any of the Rolls Royce driving, Bentley driving preachers, my brothers and sisters, I want you to hear it from this preacher wearing jeans right here in the heart of Avondale, that God cares about what's happening to the least of these. That God is concerned about what is happening. My brothers and sisters. We have a practice that we call response to the word. It is our way of acknowledging that God is not just speaking through me because I'm the one up here with the microphone, but that God desires to speak to and through each and every one of us. And so we take a moment and we say, God, what is it that you have for me today? God, what is it that you want me to see differently, to hear differently, to do differently? And then we don't just keep it to ourselves, but we turn to a friend or a neighbor and we share with them what God is sharing with us.